And Dudley, you'll be last. Okay. Good morning and welcome to NBA Base 2021. Whether you're here in Las Vegas or watching us live on the UAS social media platforms. Hi, I'm Crystal Kabeska, Regional Vice President of Sales at UAS, and I'll be your moderator today. We are delighted to be here this morning, and we warmly welcome you to our panel discussion on the next 24 months in business aviation. After these unprecedented times we've recently experienced, the question on how business aviation will develop over the next 2 years is probably one of the most fascinating and compelling topics for aviators and suppliers worldwide. We are delighted to be joined by an impressive panel of industry experts with a wealth of diverse expertise and varied experience. I think you're in for some fantastic insight over the next hour or so, so please stay with us. During this discussion, we're going to focus on trends that we're seeing in the anticipated future of business aviation in the short term regarding business, technology, safety, security, and international operations. I want to start by going around the table and allowing our panel to introduce themselves. Duke?
Yes, thank you, Crystal. My name is Duke. I'm with UAS. I've been with them for about 5 years. I started off my aviation career with air routing about a little over 20 years ago, and then moved into the operations with Texas Instruments as an operator, the manager of operations there. And I have the privilege and the pleasure to work with an incredible team who does flight planning and trip support for clients all over the world. And Mitch?
My name is Mitch Launis. I'm with 30 West IP, and we're a company that does international procedures training. And what that really comprises is a look at the international regulatory compliance for operations around the world. So I'm here to represent the operators and the challenges that they face as we look ahead. And it's really fun for me to be able to look at the future, because when I work with clients, we have to talk about right now, what's going on in the moment right now with the requirements. And this is a treat to be able to look ahead and to be with an esteemed group like this and be able to hear what they see in the future as well. So thank you, Duke, and thank you, Crystal, for inviting me to be part of this.
Hello, I'm Paulo Alves. I'm the Global Medical Director for MedAir, which is a company of the International SOS Group. MedAir provides services, support services, medical and security in general for business aviation, also commercial aviation. And what I do, I've been with them for 14 years. Prior, I was a medical director for an airline. But today, I've been with them for 14 years. Basically, what I do, I became the data sort of doctor, so looking to what we've been learning from our own experience, trying to learn things and to share, exactly this knowledge. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
And I'm Dudley King. I'm the founder of FlightBridge. FlightBridge is a technology platform. It's a booking communication tool, and it's a platform for electronically managing everything that revolves around private aviation trips. So all the third parties, everything ancillary to the trip itself. And we started FlightBridge in 2011. I've been doing technology my whole life, and private aviation technology starting in 2008. But FlightBridge is my passion now, and also I'm grateful to be part of this group and look forward to the discussion.
Great. Well, let's get started. The past 24 months have changed our world. What changes have you seen post-COVID? Duke?
Well, I think we've noticed several things that have really been a big change here in aviation. I think probably the biggest thing is that there's no such thing as an easy trip. I mean, with the changing requirements around the world and all of the new government entities that are now involved with the approval process, it is really hard for people to be able to keep up with all of those things. So something that used to be very easy to do in 2019 isn't so easy anymore. And I think also additionally, you look at what's been going on with the staffing levels and the amount of complexity with each of these trips, many of these operators are doing more work than ever before, and I think that it probably is a final thing down over there that we've noticed is that along with doing more with less down over there, I think that those are probably the biggest things that we've seen from our side.
Great. Mitch, how about you?
Well, from the operator's perspective, if you're in an organization as part of the scheduling dispatching team or a pilot crew member, there's an enormous amount of frustration because the work for an international trip is all done before you go. So you're doing all of this planning, getting everything set up like you do, and you get excited about going, and you invest a lot in it, and then you show up and it doesn't happen at the last minute, and it's hard to say how frustrating that is. And then at the second or third time when you've had to cancel a trip after preparing the whole thing, it really changes your look at what you're doing. It's very discouraging.
Yep.
Absolutely. How about you, Dr. Paula? What do you?
Well, we suffered a major impact from COVID and this past period, because of course we always studying about planning for pandemics, but honestly the proportion of it was overwhelming, right, for everyone. So our operation almost turned upside down, because now all our clients were asking for answers, so we engage a lot in educational activities, and we need to learn first, right, about the virus. And we are trying to to live with two extremely variable behaviors, human and the virus, right?
Yes.
Because both were changing on a daily basis, and even the obtention of medical knowledge was totally different, because people were publishing, and we needed to filter, the information, the wheat from the chaff, because there was so much production in non-peer-reviewed papers. So it was very hard to learn and to provide information that could be useful for the operators in the meantime. So it was really challenging times for us.
Wow. How about you, Dudley?
Yeah.
Well, I guess kind of as Duke said, what we saw was just, obviously traffic dropped off, flights dropped off to, by 90% for a few months, but within a year, things have come back and actually are about 20% higher than where we were pre-COVID. Obviously corporate is still not quite corporate travel. Business travel has not come back as much as business and leisure, but business, I think we've, as horrible as COVID has been, a lot of people who didn't fly private before are flying private now and probably won't go back.
Yes.
And so, there's just, in general, a lot more flights. A lot of people got, didn't survive, don't mean survive from a life and death perspective, but didn't keep their jobs over COVID. So we don't have the same staffing levels, that we had before, but we had more flights. So it's just, more traffic, with less people doing the work, as you said, pilot shortage on top of that. So it's challenging times ahead.
Yes.
So that's really interesting, Dudley. So if that's true, and there's fewer people doing more volume, something really has to give. What do you think that is?
Well, it's not going to be the quality of the trip, because so you're right, something has to give. So it's either people are working harder or they're working smarter. And I think the latter, obviously, people, and I think a lot of people took the break, during the slow period to actually refine their processes, pick up new tools, prepare for. We all thought things were going to go back to normal eventually. We didn't know how quickly, at least the flight volumes would come back. But definitely working smarter. Technology. I mean, I'm biased, but I think working smarter with technology, electronically. Less phone calls and just more streamlined is got to be the way going forward. And I think people know that instinctively. This has been kind of this has forced a lot of that to just happen. For people who hadn't already kind of started to embrace technology earlier.
Wow, that's interesting.
I think you're exactly right. I think that working longer and harder is a great way to get to burnout and mistakes.
Right.
So I think good processes help to be able to maximize the existing staff that you have. And so having better processes and also maybe finding ways to be able to delegate some of those responsibility to a trusted partner is also another great best practice that people have been able to use to maximize the little bit of resources that they currently have. I know that there's some real hesitation at this point, not knowing what the future holds, to increase staffing for a lot of these organizations.
Absolutely right. I think that was exactly how we felt this, because the flight departments were working to plan ahead and to prepare for the new scenarios.
Yes.
And that of course demanded a lot of research and work. Just to mention testing, for example, right?
Yes.
So all of a sudden testing became part of our day to day, and it was not, right?
Yes.
So we need to learn which one was best, more appropriate to the different circumstances. Not to mention all the international restrictions and requirements. So it was a very dynamic things, right? So that we were, the whole community worked much harder than
Yes.
I think, isn't it?
100%. I agree.
Dr. Alves, what is the role of the vaccination?
Well, I should start by saying that vaccinations were one of the major achievements in medicine in general. We tend to forget that, but a while ago, not so long ago, smallpox will kill 30% of people acquiring it. So it was a major development, and I think it is not different here. And I understand that this became a sort of a sensitive situation, but so I can only speak from the strictly medical standpoint. Vaccines in general are very good, and from what we see about the vaccines that are available, they are very, very good. And of course, they have side effects, but to me, it's just like thinking about, okay, you know what? Sometimes airplane crash, so I don't fly airplanes, right? I take a car. To me, honestly, yes, there is some, expected side effects. It's obvious, but I don't know, for example, because life doesn't give you two chances, right? So if you had a side effect, I don't know what would happen if you had the disease, because most of the side effects are actually reaction of your organism to that exposure. So overall, I would say that vaccinations is not only, they are not 100% effective, they are never 100% effective, but a very valuable tool in this fight. And again, we need to carefully consider it, because it's we believe in a stacked, a Swiss cheese model, the same concept, only that the slices have very big holes, unfortunately. But anyways, that's why you need to stack them, multiple layers here. So just an important part of that multiple layer system.
Well, it's interesting. And does the type of vaccine matter at all?
Well, that's a very good question. Yes, they are not born the same. Their mechanism of action is slightly different. It varies. However, when we looked into the impact of vaccination in different countries using different vaccines, there is always some benefit. Slightly better here, but again, keep in mind that we are controlling, so many moving parts, so many variables at the same time. So people are culturally different and whatever. But so far, the evidence that all the approved vaccines are pretty good and working.
Oh, that's good to know. And especially, there's a lot of questions out there about that. Now, are there any other changes in the industry that you guys are noticing out there? Dudley?
So I guess one thing, and I'm not sure if this has anything to do with COVID, but we've noticed that the pilots are kind of doing a little bit more on the, they're booking their hotels themselves more. That's just something with our user base where maybe it's part of trying to attract and retain them, because they can, it's one thing that's important to them is where they sleep, and getting their points and being able to choose that themselves is something, I don't know. So that's, one thing we've noticed that's not related to COVID. Obviously, the COVID impacts are there. Not sure. I can't think of anything else right now.
Yeah, definitely. And as far as industry changes and everything else, Dr. Alves, do you see any changes that you've noticed?
in the industry.
Yeah, any other changes maybe out there?
Oh yeah. I mean, we need to prepare to the uncertain, right? So and again, I think we need to do our parts into this. I would say that everything has changed dramatically, right? So new protocols, new procedures, new routines, how to take care. From because for example, we've seen a few cases, not a few cases, quite a significant number of cases where the most when crew members got the virus, for example, they were actually acquiring from each other because when you travel with someone, you actually stay with that person for sometimes more time than in your household, right? So you have breakfast and then you have lunch. So and what we identified that many crew members were identifying their possible exposure among themselves. So this became also an occupational preoccupation because you can almost destroy a whole flight department if everyone is infected, right? So you need to incorporate those plannings as well. So yeah, and this will stay for quite a while, I'm afraid to say. Right.
Definitely. How about you, Mitch? What are you seeing out there?
Well, what we see is that we've all adapted by moving into a virtual environment, not too dissimilar from what we're doing right now. And there's a lot of successes in there, and there's a lot of lessons that we can take away from that and things we can leverage in the future. But I think one of the real important lessons of this is there's true value in being face-to-face. We see it here in the convention. Being able to work with people in this convention means a lot to me in the days that I'm here. And if you're running a business, being able to go to the environment where that operation occurs and working with the people there's no substitute for that.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a hybrid model moving forward, and we're going to continue to see that value in business aviation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right. When people get a chance to come together, the collaboration is so much better. So, Dr. Alves, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Zoom's not replacing the face-to-face, but we will definitely do more Zoom. It just means more collaboration in general. People are going to just spend more time probably collaborating than they did before because they can do it from home. They can do it from anywhere.
Yes, definitely. Dr. Alves, what do you think the mask policies, what role will that take inside of a flight department?
Yeah, it goes back to that multi-layer approach, right? So masks by themselves are not enough, are not sufficient. However, it's honestly, I think sometimes it's boring to wear them, and sometimes for extended period of time. But however, I would say that it's a minor contribution, because keep in mind that when we are wearing a mask, actually you are protecting someone else. So I think it's the right thing to do. So, and again, in a multi-layer system, right? Because again, what this virus has been proven to us that it is powerful, isn't it? Come on, we're not expecting this to last so long. So I would say that every opportunity that we have to try to contain it, it's worthwhile. So that's why.
Good feedback. Now, with all the upheaval with the pandemic, this caused business aviation community. What have been your observations on the industry in the immediate future?
Well, I'll tell you what. To say it's been impactful is, an understatement, right? I mean, I think it's really changed the game when you look at the immediate impact that it had when people stopped traveling and moving around. The commercial airlines started going into self-prevention mode, and so they cut back their operations, and which impacted the supply chain to a great effect. I mean, we still see shortages and a lot of things based on the impact that we've seen over there. Now, closer to our industry, we've seen changes in the trip support providers, a lot of whom really supported the Part 91 operators, and they got everything scaled back even more. So a lot of the people that were working for these companies were downsized or furloughed to a long extended period of time, and many of them are never coming back. They've left the industry and they've taken something else down over there. So that's left a hole in a lot of operations, or at least a small gap down over there. And so with the uncertainty, those spots are not necessarily getting filled. And even if people want to fill them, I've heard so many instances where you just can't find the right people to be able to fit inside that hole that's down over there. Another thing that I've noticed is that there's, with the gap of the Rockwell Collins, is that there's a lot of mom and pop shops that have opened up to do trip support, which is, I think the big concern with that is just the capacity and the experience to be able to support the operators that need end-to-end support. And so to really get that, but it shows that there's a real desire to be able to have a more attention to detail approach to the service industry. I think that there's a big gap there. And then the other thing with Rockwell going away was from the trip support side is the full one-stop shop. There's less options than there ever has been before. So trying to get all of your pieces fit together as an air crew is a real challenge. So that's the biggest thing I've seen.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mitch.
Well, this has really been a surprising event for us as operators, because I've been through a lot of economic turmoil where as the economy turns, a corporation will look at a business aircraft organization and say, well, maybe we should trim that, maybe that wasn't wise. And that's not what we're seeing here. I think that what business aviation operators are seeing is that people at the highest level now value that service. The ability to provide that support, which allows them to operate in a safe, secure environment. And so we've seen some added value. Operators haven't cut back like we've seen other parts of the industry. And while that has, and I'm sure there's somebody here who has been affected by that, in the large, big picture, we've come through this with more value, not less.
Yeah, no,
That's good. Good feedback. How about you, Dr. Elvis?
No, I think I think it's very difficult to predict, what is ahead, because, as I said, we're still dealing with a lot of unknown, right, here and there, and it's a natural thing. As transmission of the virus continue, we will see more variants here and there. But but I think the message should be we cannot let this become a permanent crisis. In other words, we need to adapt to and to change to live with this situation that will stay for a while. And I think what we are getting here right now is actually a very good example, right? Because I just defended the use of masks and I'm not wearing masks, right? So because we had a very strong initial barrier here, because everyone in this has been vaccinated and showed proof of vaccination. In other words, we had a very strong layer. And so I think there are ways to deal with that, and we need to adapt, because otherwise it will be always back and forth. And we definitely need to move forward and to meet in person, as we've been saying. So.
How about you?
Like like Duke said, there's been a lot of change. There's going to be a lot of change ahead. A lot of suppliers didn't survive, through the COVID downturn. In our industry anyway, one of the top 3 hotels in Van Nuys, the Airtel, is no more, or it's become a shelter or something, I've heard. The Westchester Hilton is shut down. There may be others who there's just going to be change. There's going to be new suppliers. There's going to be consolidation in some cases. Ultimately, the stronger suppliers with the better processes, will survive and just be better probably for this. But still unknown ahead. Boosters, I guess, are going to start to become a norm, hopefully, and
I think so.
Maybe.
I think so.
I don't know. Do you predict? I mean, can anybody predict? Are we gonna be? Is this going to be like a flu shot that we have to do every year going forward, or?
What I can say is everyone who tried to do a prediction was wrong so far. So I wouldn't try anything at this point.
Yeah.
All right, so the quick answer is, do you foresee an end to the pandemic?
Yeah, I guess so.
What do you say, Dudley? No idea?
My magic 8 ball says. I have no idea.
Doctor?
No, I don't. I mean, we're certainly. There is this thing about herd immunity, right? So, as more people are getting vaccinated, and unfortunately, some people that are not vaccinated get getting the disease itself. The disease itself also produces some immunity. We're still learning for how long, how strong, But anyways, we will. This will phase down at some point. We just don't know when, right? Because the possibility of variants and therefore breakthrough infections in the system. So the honest answer is, yeah, we don't know, but we hope for the better.
I think that I don't think that this stuff is ending anytime soon. If you look at now, you've got a lot of health authorities who are embedded in the approval process. Once you've got those bureaucrats kind of tentacles in that process, they're not going to let that go. Just like 9/11 was kind of a watershed moment for security and that kind of stuff, this was kind of a watershed moment for the health side of things, and I think that we're going to see more and more of that moving forward. At least that's what I see from our side. I don't see any signs that it's going to be going away anytime soon.
That stand 6 feet away from people, that's probably going to just be ingrained, whether you're wearing a mask or not, or whether you're vaccinated or not. It's like, I don't want to get in your space because I don't know how you might feel about it or how I might feel about it.
How about you, Mitch? Any thoughts on that?
Well, after 9/11, we created TSA, and we all thought it was a nightmare, and we adapted. Now, this is a little bit different, but the idea of masking and vaccines is as political as TSA. And I think that we in the past talked about there's a malaria region, there's an Ebola outbreak, there's a Zika concern. We're going to see something that's going to engage us with this going forward. It's going to be part of all of our processes as we look to see what is ahead. We're going to start paying a lot more attention to the health issues like we have seen at TSA become ingrained.
Yes.
Yeah, good.
If I may add to that, I think you are absolutely nailed in the head, because there is no solution while this is an international concern and should be addressed with international efforts. Yeah, that's the only way.
Yes, that's good. What are the implications of COVID-19 for the population, business, and general aviation crews?
Yeah. So I think, like we touched on earlier, where you've got increased complexity of the trips, you've got a situation where you've got less people being involved. I think that a lot of people are turning to different types of solutions, and like Flatbridge, but also employing domestic help, where previously domestic was all done in-house. We've noticed a big uptick on just the domestic support that pilots are using. There's so many ATC zeros, weather delays, and that kind of stuff. In order to be able to operate safely and doing that stuff, I mean, it takes your full capacity to be a pilot and to deal with the passengers. It's good to have an extra set of hands, eyes, ears to be able to work with you, and I think that's one way that people have supplemented what they're currently doing without adding additional staff.
That's good. Good feedback.
Yeah.
Dr. Alves, do you have any thoughts on that? Any implications on the COVID and how it's affecting flight crews?
Yes, I'm particularly concerned because, again, I think it's a good message. It's better not have it. We are still learning so much. We know this long COVID things, and that affects from 10 to 30%. With some, consequences in your cognitive function, meaning memory and things like that. And we don't want pilots with cognitive dysfunction, right? So, it's basic. And again, we are talking about, the lack of pilots, so we don't want, even less due to a disease, right? So we need actually to protect, our population on that regard. So I think it should be a very active effort, in preventing it.
That's good. Exactly. Now, Dudley, your specialty is technology. Kind of want to get into that discussion a little bit, and technology and logistics. So, in private aviation, where do you see the future improvements?
Yeah, and again, COVID might have been a watershed that helped, but something that was moving regardless. Prior to COVID, there's been a shift to, employing technology around international trip support, around domestic trip support, around all the, moving pieces and parts, transportation and catering and FBO services and handler services, and the old way of doing that was lots of phone calls, maybe doing a lot of it yourself. So there's going to be more delegating to trusted partners, like UAS, more technology to do it yourself and do it efficiently. I think that's just going to. It was already happening prior to COVID. COVID kind of forced some people to adopt technology that had been kind of slow to it before, and that'll just continue to accelerate. I think the tools will get better. There'll be more, people, won't be happy with emails and phone calls because it's just, too easy to get something wrong. So that'll just continue to evolve.
One thing that we've noticed is that people are communicating in different ways, maybe non-traditional ways, fax, emails, and phone calls. They're employing applications like WhatsApp, Zoom, and Teams to be able to communicate more effectively than they have in the past. And that's kind of a transition over the last few years that that we've not seen, but has been really kind of more effective than what we've done in the past. So it's good.
That's good. What other technologies are you guys seeing over there, Mitch? Anything that you?
Well, this is a topic that I love, and I don't get to talk about it very much because we try to stay with the current requirements, but we're at an inflection point with technology in terms of the operator of the cockpit. And we're seeing electronic plotting begin to innovate. And we're not talking about taking an iPad and putting your route on there and making a bunch of marks. We're talking about a vendor where you give the vendor your data package, like ForeFlight Dispatch or Plot-NG, and they actually place it on there and then give your ETPs to you, and that reduces error. And in a procedural environment in oceanic airspace, that error management is so critical. And I was talking to Rick Ballou during our meeting earlier this week, and Rick and I were talking about when we did IRSs and they had 10 waypoints and we made nav logs, and we did it all in pencil. And there's not a lot of people that remember that. But when we started seeing computer flight plans, things like UAS, what you guys do, and when we started seeing those come on board, there were people that would say, well, Mitch is lazy. Why doesn't Mitch want to do this? Why does he want this computerized flight plan? Well, the computerized flight plan was smarter, it made everything safer, and it helped eliminate a ton of errors. And that's exactly where we are with electronic plotting. That's what Rick and I were talking about. We're at the beginning of something that's going to evolve and really make the cockpit safer.
Yes.
Space-based ADS-B with surveillance in oceanic airspace, and other technologies that are coming down the road, like space-based VHF transmissions that are going to work with space-based ADS-B. So for us, it's a real exciting time, and being able to talk about the next 2 or 3 years is something that I really enjoy. So I'm glad to be here talking about that.
Exciting, for sure. How about you, Dr. Alves, on the medical side?
We've been doing a lot of investment in technology, in ways to improve communication, because let's face it, the situation is so dynamic, changing, on a minute basis, even the restrictions and all this stuff, right? So the health situation in specific countries, so that we need to have a platform that is really agile in providing this information, and there's nothing like technology. So we developed, several alternatives, not only to give country-specific information restrictions from the security and medical standpoint, but also in ways to communicate with the crew member in flight, so via an app that directs more or less, to scenarios that are more common, and how to identify a suspected infectious disease, for example, occurring in flight. So all this has been developed at very pretty exciting times.
Yeah, it's exciting to see where technology is taking us, and the big push that we've had over the last 24 months to get there. So
Efficiency, transparency, easier access to information, whether it's medical or confirmations from your vendor.
That's right. So I'll tell you what, one of the hot topics that we've gotten recently is, let's say a customer, somebody's overseas, and somebody on board catches COVID while they're overseas. What has been the process, or what are things that we've seen as to work with these organizations to get those people back stateside? Any thoughts on that? Doctor,
out of my realm.
Yeah.
I believe it is my realm. It's a very interesting question, because remember when I said that in the beginning we were working in planning, so people were exactly planning ahead. So in case of my principal having a problem, how could I deal with that in anticipation? And effectively it happened right here and there. And of course there are several ways of approach to the problem, but all predicated in the clinical situation. That's why the medical input is so important, to evaluate the situation against for example, the hospital facilities in that specific location, because depending on the severity of the situation and how good are the resources, sometimes it's better to stay there and not to try to move, because moving someone always adds some risk, some instability to the process, right? But sometimes the situation local is, it's not sustainable, and therefore hospitals are overwhelmed, and that happened. So then we need to plan. And then it could be sometimes, if it's just someone tested positive, then you can build safeguards and procedures to that specific mission. Or no, the situation is so severe that we need air ambulance with all bells and whistles to protect not only the person but all involved, the crew members as well. So it's a spectrum.
And from, I think one of the biggest factors is where is the flight going to be originating from? Because each of these countries is going to have their own restrictions, their own quarantine rules, which make it increasingly difficult to be able to do that to begin with. And then you got to think about whether or not you want to put your crews at risk, in that situation. Is it so important to be able to get your people back? It's like you said, it really depends. And there's so many variables that go into making a decision of that magnitude to your flight
back
department.
To collaboration, because you can't operate in a vacuum.
Yeah.
There were times 20, 30 years ago we would make decisions on the ground and move people. Mm-hmm. You can't do that anymore. Yeah. You've got to talk to the experts. There are too many things that are working together, and that collaboration becomes critical.
Yes, 100%.
But we've been transporting people even in cargo planes, sometimes. So yeah, they were natural isolation. So creativity was not the problem.
That's right. And as things get more complicated, there's a lot of changes. And Mitch, what are some of the changes you're seeing for the North Atlantic oceanic operations?
Well, the North Atlantic System Planning Group, the governing body for the North Atlantic, recently published a vision for 2030. So I don't have to be too imaginative. I can borrow from that. And a couple things that we're going to see in the near term are for those operators, PBCS airspace, the reduced separation airspace, has been codified in ICAO standards. So it's going to be expanded in the North Atlantic, and it's going to be utilized as per the track message designation. It's not going to be the traditional 3.5 to 3.9. So that's for the operators. That's a change coming down the road in the near future. And then in the next couple of years, they're working diligently to come up with a really good solution to drop in the oceanic airborne clearance. And those are two things that operators have to look forward in the next couple of years in the North Atlantic.
Wow, sounds like some big changes for sure. But how about the oceanic changes in the Pacific? Anything coming up there?
Well, the Pacific, prior to COVID, had looked at reducing separation with PBCS separation like the North Atlantic, and that had got pushed back because of COVID. But I think we can look ahead and say, yeah, they're obviously going to need to do that. Their first, the area they were going to utilize it was the North Pacific. So we're going to see those type of technologies spread across the rest of the world, and a lot of exciting stuff with space-based technologies that are in development.
And one of the things that we anticipate is that there's been a reduced flow of traffic going to Asia, and I think that has largely been due to China still being shut down largely for the most part, and really giving no indication that they are going to open things up anytime soon. I mean, even with the Olympics coming up next year, Civil Aviation China has not really given much guidance about that, which is very unusual for an Olympic year. Typically, there's a longer lead time for those type of events. And so also, just over a week ago, the Olympic Committee made an announcement that people will not be able to attend who are non-Chinese residents. And so that kind of gives us a little bit of a crystal ball that they're not anticipating opening things up. So Asia has really largely taken a more conservative approach towards opening up their airspace, and I think that is going to continue to be the case, at least in the near term.
That's interesting, and good to know that they've got that type of information and hopefully more flowing soon.
Yes.
So, final thoughts. What is your outlook over the next 24 months? And I'd like to just go around the table on that. Any thoughts on that?
Well, from my side, and the things that I'm seeing is that people are utilizing business aircraft more than ever before. I think that right now, like Dudley had mentioned earlier, there's tons of movement in the domestic market. Things are still kind of up the air and changing daily. In the international side, I think once things start to open up even more, people are going to utilize this bigger and more than ever before. I think that, when I saw what had happened after 9/11, there was a huge increase in the amount of business aviation that was being used. I'd never seen anything like it. And I think that with this same stuff, people are going to see the value of having a business aircraft, both from a health standpoint, but also security and not just the convenience as well, from having to take your primary passengers and people who are leaders of your company and having them tucked away in a commercial airline and spending all this time traveling and being exposed. It's just people are finding the value in business aviation.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Yeah.
Mitch, how about
I
you?
would second that. I think that the business aviation community is going to become more important and have a more integral role in the future. And but the consequence is going to be that we're going to have a lot more collaboration. We're not going to be able to do it in the silos that we did before.
Yes.
It's going to involve medical professionals, technology people, people that can manage last-minute changes in order to be able to make this happen.
Yeah, 100%.
Exactly.
I'm just going to say I'm optimistic about the future. I think we got through a tough period. Business aviation got stronger. I think there'll be another interesting few years with the more sensitivity to the climate and emissions, and I think there will be changes in technology, whether it's hydrogen or in the short term, just carbon offsets and other ways that it may make some aspects of business aviation more expensive, but there are ways to have both, to still protect the environment, increase the use of business aircraft. So that'll just be one more logistics thing that'll have to be managed on every trip, is your emissions tracking and your carbon offsets, or making sure you're buying the right fuel. So it'll be something we'll figure out over the next couple of years.
I'm glad to be the last because I can say that I just agree with all that I said before, and I can only add that I think that the importance of business aviation is very unique in this setting because it provides actually a very good, how could I say, for the lack of a better word, experimental, smaller sample of international travel. So testing strategies and all the cross-border strategies can be better observed also in business aviation because it's a more controlled environment, let's say, than commercial with all the number of passengers, right? So I think it is particularly important, and I know that is exactly what is happening. People are using more and more efficiently. So it's really fascinating times ahead. And again, it cannot be an unsustainable situation, right? So we need to evolve and adapt to that. And again, I think business aviation will play a major role in that.
Absolutely. Well, everyone, I want to give you a very special thanks for being part of our discussion today, and just want to take the time to say thank you, Dudley King, President and Founder of FlightBridge. We've got Dr. Paulo Alves, the Global Director for MedAir, Mitch Lanas, the pilot instructor at 30 West, CEO. And of course, our very own Duke LeDuc from UAS. So we're so thankful for your time, and we look forward to next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.